Alright, so this video is going to cover three of your kind of like health skills. I like to call them like this as like your health toolbox. So we're going to talk about these three skills down at the bottom. So refusal skills, decision making, and goal setting. Now, these, if you read through these, like this is a pretty important toolbox, if you will, since we're kind of calling it a toolbox. But like being able to communicate with others is huge. If you can effectively communicate with others and share your feelings in a respectful and polite way, I think that it goes a long way. And like resolving conflict. I think in today's world, it's getting more and more important to be able to agree to disagree and do that in a very polite and respectful manner. Anyway, so we're going to move forward. We're going to talk about these three down here, and then there will be some assignments. So hopefully this will help you when it comes time to reading and doing those assignments. All right, so we'll start with decision making. I kind of want you to think about like all the decisions that you've made today. Now, some of them are just kind of like, well, we'll start at the beginning of the day, like deciding to hit snooze or not. Like some are really, really simple decisions that might actually not be simple for some of you, but some are simple, some are like small, but then there's other bigger decisions that we have to make. And that's kind of what we're going to get to with this decision making, is like the bigger things you have to decide on. Because there's things throughout your day that you probably haven't even thought about, like deciding like how to respond to someone, or what to eat or what to wear or whatever, those little things, which, you know, can be kind of important, especially to teenagers at this time. But like we're talking like bigger decisions you're going to have to make within the next 5, even 10 years. And think about like why decision making is in that health toolbox. Like, why is it an important skill? Also keep in mind that there are positive and negative consequences, and then each decision has one or the other. All right. So I kind of talked about this. These are things that you kind of have to decide on every day. Like, what are you going to go to school, or what school to go to? What friends are you going to have? What lunch to pick? And then you get like to the more difficult ones, where I know that like what classes to take can cause a lot of stress to some people, and then also a career to pursue. And you're not alone. If you're struggling right now, like most of you are going to be sophomores, you shouldn't be stressing too much about it, but at least start to think about that career. And that's what this model is going to help with, is kind of breaking down the pros and cons in a way when it comes to choosing a career path. And that's just one example. Okay, so you need to know the great decision-making model. First, you're going to give thought to the problem, which problem would be like the decision, you know. We say it's a problem, but I think that that's kind of got negative connotation to it. But review your choices, evaluate the consequences, assess your values, and then take action and think it over. So we're going to go over each of those really quick. So giving thought to the problem, think about like, well, what it is. What's the problem? Like, are you, like some people, if it's the classes, like what classes should I take? Or maybe it's like, I want to work, I want to get a job, I have these 3 places that I'm going to apply to, or I want to apply to. Maybe it's the career thing. Maybe it's like a car or something. I don't know. So that's the situation. Okay. Who's involved? Maybe it's close friends. Maybe it's your family. A lot of times it'll probably be those that are close to you. Are you feeling pressure? A lot of times when we have to make a decision, it's important to kind of step back and think like, am I feeling like outside pressure to go one way or the other? And because that could definitely affect the decisions we make. And especially at this age with you guys, with being in your teens, peer pressure is a big issue and plays a big role in the decisions we make. Let's see, and like what other influences are there on your decision? How much time you have to decide. That actually is kind of a big deal, an important thing to consider. So reviewing your options. What are all the possible options? Is not acting an option? And And then it's important to be able to have people to talk to kind of go over your options. Okay, so then let's say that like you're deciding on a college, which college to go to. And we'll just say we're going to stay here in Utah. Utah State, go Aggies, by the way. BYU and University of Utah. Those are your three options. Like, yes, you're deciding between two rival schools. We'll just throw that out there. Okay, so then you're going to say, like, let's start with Utah State. You're going to list the options, the consequences, positive and negative for Utah State, positive and negative things for BYU, positive and negative for University of Utah. And actually, there may only be two options. Like, you don't have to have three. So you're going to, it's kind of, this is like the pros and cons kind of thing. And then you're going to assess your values. You got to think about, like, do you value your relationships or your family? Like, let's say that maybe one of those schools was like out of state. If you valued your family time and your relationships, that could definitely affect you deciding on that college and going out of state. Valuing money or time or whatever. Like, maybe it's the quality of education and you feel like this school provides it better than another school or whatever. I know that, like, for me, I went to Utah State, and Utah State is known for having a really good education program. And since I went into education, that kind of is what drove me to go there. So yeah, you got to think about, like, do any of these choices kind of go against your values? And then do any of them make you feel uncomfortable? Take action. You've eventually got to decide, right? At this point, you've listed the pros and cons, and then you've got to make a decision. And then afterwards, you should reflect on your decision. Now, it might be too late if you're like, you're in Provo and you're like, oh crap, like, I think I want to be a Ute. Like, it's kind of too late for that. But there are some decisions where you can kind of at least, like, look back and learn from it, and like, oh, okay, like, I probably should have paid more attention to this, or this person, or this thing, or whatever was pressuring me to go one way or the other. And so at least being able to reflect, you can know for next time, maybe what you would change. And maybe, I say next time, and some people might be like, well, there is no next time, but maybe it's like maybe you decide to go to the University of Utah for like your master's degree or something. So thinking it over afterwards is actually a really important part of the great decision-making model. I want you to kind of think about, like, what are the specific benefits or advantages to using this model, but also keep in mind, I guess, that, like, you're not gonna, like, write down with every decision you're making. These are, like, bigger decisions, and actually, you probably don't realize it, but you kind of do go through this model really quickly mentally when there's decisions that you have to make that might not be, like, as intense as, like, choosing what career or, like, what school to go to or whatever, but, like, you do kind of weigh the pros and cons in that very moment. But there are times where it's going to benefit you to actually sit down and write these things out. I mentioned the influences from different things or people or whatever, and these are some of the things. So, like, different influences as far as, like, your values. Peers, I already said that was a big influence. The media, family, maybe your faith, and then emotions. There's different types of influences as well, so positive and negative. There's also different types of pressure. So if someone tries to convince you to do something that you normally wouldn't, would be direct pressure. But indirect pressure would be like thoughts, your beliefs maybe, being swayed by those things instead of someone actually, like, directly pressuring you to do something. So just really quick to give you an example to help you understand. Here's an example. So Emily decides not to smoke since she has seen how hard it has been for her grandpa to quit. So her family, right? It's positive because she's deciding not to smoke, and then it's indirect because it's her belief, like, she's witnessed what it's done. It's not necessarily someone directly saying, like, oh, don't smoke. Hopefully that makes sense. And then the next one, all of Matt's friends sneak into a movie, call him a wimp. When he tries to go home, he sneaks in with them. So definitely peer pressure there. It's negative because he ended up sneaking in, and it's direct because his friends were directly saying, hey, like, calling him a wimp and trying to pressure him to go, which he caved. And then there's Candace yells at her mom because she's angry about school. Her dad tells her not to talk like that to her mother, so then she realizes he's right and she apologizes. So that's positive and it's direct because, I mean, it turned into that positive and it was her dad that was like, hey, that's not acceptable or whatever. Okay, so that was decision making. Moving on to the next health skill, refusal skills. A lot of students in this health class get the refusal skills and decision making assignments kind of mixed up. Keep in mind with decision making, I want you to think about the decisions like the career or the job or the car or should I go on this vacation or spend my money on this car or my tuition or whatever. Refusal skills is more like the peer pressure, kind of like in that last slide with like being pressured to sneak into the movie. This is things like, you should say no. The easiest thing to turn to is like substance abuse, but there's so many different scenarios. Like a big one with you teenagers is sloughing. Another huge one that I'm seeing is cheating. So those are some common ones. Others would be maybe like bullying. I don't know, maybe like sneaking out, like curfew or whatever. Like, but there's situations that are going to come up that you're going to feel pressured, and you've got to be able to say no. So it's important to be able to know these skills and practice them. I know that some of you may think that this is kind of silly, but I guarantee you've had situations that you may not have thought that you were using refusal skills, and I hope that you were. I hope you didn't cave, but you do, and you like if you practice these and remember these skills, and I think it'll just kind of become second nature. Okay, so, and hopefully you start to kind of think about the times that you've used these. Like I said, I hope you've used them and not just caved in every single peer pressure situation that has come up. So here they are. So you're going to say no in a firm voice. Notice how firm is standing out there? The reason why I say this is because if you are like, let's say that your friend is like, hey, let's go smoke some weed. And you're like, no, I'm okay. Instead of like, no, like that's dumb. Like you've got to be firm in what in your body language, how you're delivering your message. Because I don't know if you've heard this before, but nonverbal communication is way more than verbal communication. It's like up to like by 75%, 80% or whatever of our total communication is nonverbal. So it's not necessarily what you're saying, it's how you're saying it. So usually explain why goes right after the no. Like maybe it's no, like that stuff isn't for me, or it's dangerous, or I've heard this and this and this, or whatever. Maybe it's like the sloughing thing, like, oh no, I've got a really important test today, or hey, this is a great time to like use your parents as the scapegoat, like, oh man, my mom or dad would kill me, or like you can use them as your out, like be like, oh, I have to, I don't know, that would be lying. I was gonna say like I have to go help my mom or dad, but what I feel like lying in that situation is probably good. It's probably a good thing. But explain why you're saying no, like, no, that's not for me. And then suggest alternatives. So like, let's say with the sloughing thing, let's say your friend was like, hey, let's slough health class. Let's go and, I don't know, beat the rush at lunch and go get lunch early instead of go to class. So you would be like, no, I've got an important test. How about we just go somewhere closer or whatever during lunch? Or let's go to lunch over the weekend. I don't know, like come up with an alternative to kind of get them thinking like of something else and how it's probably not a good idea of what they are suggesting. And then 4 isn't necessarily like a step, but you need to make sure you're backing your words with body language. Like I said in the first one, say no. You've got to, your body language needs to match what you're saying. Because if you're like, no, your friend knows right away that they've almost got you. And so they're going to try just a little bit harder, say a little bit, maybe something different, word it differently, because they know that they've almost got you convinced that it's going to be fun and a good idea. And then if that doesn't work, if none of this is working and you are already set, then just be like, no, I'm good. Like, I've got this. I'm going to go. An important thing is to kind of leave the door open, and we're going to get to that in just a second, but leave if necessary. Okay, so this goes into specifics with the refusal skills. I'm going to kind of skip through some of them, but like naming the trouble, like with saying no, and like name the trouble. No, that's cheating. That's illegal. That's wrong. Those are some things that you can say to kind of do the, like, explain your reasoning for that, and then maybe even say like no, and then that will make me sick, or my mom would kill me. That's kind of what I mentioned earlier. Like, that's not a good idea. Someone could get hurt. And then this is like suggesting alternatives, like, let's go watch a movie at my house instead. I think we should go play basketball or whatever. Like, come up with an alternative that is appropriate for kind of what you guys like to do together. And then stand your ground. Make it clear that you are not backing down. This is what I was talking about earlier, walking away, leaving the door open. This is an example. So like, you're feeling pressured or whatever, it gets to the point where you're like, okay, this friend of mine is not like listening to what I'm saying. So you just say, hey, well, I'm gonna go get a Slurpee and watch a movie at my house. You can come if you want, just call me. And then you leave. You've kind of left the door open, and then they can decide whether or not they're going to come with you or not. All right, so we've covered great decision making, we've covered refusal skills, now goal setting. I think a lot of people, just like teenagers, roll their eyes with goal setting, but I hope that's not you right now, because this is so important. Like, if you can use like these tips in like this format of how we're putting this together and setting it up, I think that you're really setting yourself up for some success with your goals, as long as they're like realistic. So think about like short-term versus long-term goals. Do you have? Obviously long-term, within the next few years. Short-term is going to be a little bit shorter time frame than that. I'll skip this a little bit because I want to make sure that this isn't too long for you guys. Okay, so you're going to come up with an action plan. Now, I've mentioned this in an earlier video. Writing your goal down is important. You may not think that, but let's say that you're on the track team and you want to improve your mile time. So here's what I suggest. You write down the time you want to get. You post a sticky note everywhere that you go, like the bathroom, your car, your bedroom, on your ceiling, so that you see that time every single day, multiple times a day. That, I think, alone is going to help to kind of motivate you to work towards your goal with the breakdown of how you're going to do it. So then small goals, you're going to come up with 3 little goals that are going to help you reach the big one. So here's an example. I think I gave this in one of my other videos. So I wanted to run the Boston Marathon. So my small goals, an example, could be like run this half marathon and see if like my half marathon time could match up with what a full marathon half would be, if that makes any sense to you. Another small goal could be like, you might not think is applicable, but like really locking down consumption of water and your diet, because that can really help play into the bigger goal. Okay, so I mean, I'm not going to give 3. So just small goals. Smaller goals are going to help you get to the main goal. And then 2 sources of help. So like for me, if I had a friend that was a runner too, I would say like, hey, you want to come running with me? Especially the long runs. Training for a marathon is probably one of the more difficult things than actually running it, because training is pretty time consuming. Set a deadline, or set a time to reach your goal. For mine, like the time was like when the marathon was, and then some checkpoints to kind of check up on like how you're doing. So like maybe with my marathon training, if it's like a 3-month schedule, like once a month, I'm going to be like, okay, here's how things are going, and then adjust accordingly. And then heck, reward yourself. Like And maybe someone else would be involved with that, like your parents at this point in your life. If you reach a goal, maybe your parents would like give you, I don't know, a gift card, iTunes, or hey, maybe it's a car. I don't know. But if the reward can be there, then I think it's a little more motivating as well. So here's an example, another one. Sorry, this is all about running. You can tell kind of where my passions are, but all right, so be able to run a mile in 6 minutes and 20 seconds. So you're breaking it down. Your 3 smaller goals would be run for 30 minutes 3 times per week. Another one would be drink 3 bottles of water each day, and then eat 3 balanced meals per day. Your support is mom. Maybe mom can run with you. The deadline would be November 1st. Running a mile one time every other week would kind of be like your check-in to kind of see where you are, and then you can adjust accordingly. And then I don't know if like this shirt is a motivation enough, but maybe go and reward yourself with a new shirt. So there's that example. So hopefully that helps you out with your with the goal setting part of this, and then hopefully you have a better understanding of decision making, refusal skills, and goal setting, because you're going to have to do some assignments that are geared towards these things. So if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. Also, please use the Remind system. You can text me through that, through Remind. You can also reply to any Remind texts that I send out. So please make sure that you use that so that we can make sure communication is there and you are not confused at any point throughout the course.